Welcome, welcome one and all. I'm Swiss and this is just the most stunning sunny September afternoon, and I thought I'd go for a ride and have a chat about the Sondors Metacycle. Now, when I first saw the Sondors Metacycle, it was just unbelievably sexy. It had pretty good specs, and I just thought this is something I have got to have in my garage as a second bike to my Zero S. And the specs for the bike were that it was a bike that would have peak power of 14.5 kilowatts or continuous peak power of 8 kilowatts. It's going to do 0 to 60 in about 6 seconds. It's going to have 80 miles of range, top speed of 80 miles an hour. For the bargain price of $5,000, you'd put down a $100 deposit, pay the balance as the bike was going to be delivered, along with a $700 delivery charge. So pretty much the bargain of the century. The 4 kilowatt hour battery was going to be removable. I had a great video of the rider getting off the bike, putting the key in behind the back wheel in the underside of the bike, and having turned the key, the battery would then just slide out for charging at home or in the office. And it just looked absolutely fabulous. It was finished in a beautiful polished or burnished aluminium, and I'm a big sucker for just plain burnished, polished aluminium as a finish. It's just so tactile, it's so sexy. So yeah, I thought, got to find out a bit more about this. So I joined an online forum and started doing some research. It was when I did the research that I started finding a few things that just didn't quite add up. And the old saying goes, if it appears too good to be true, probably is too good to be true. And what we're talking about here is the fact that the bike had 8 kilowatts of continuous power. And realistically, the Macrace, which is an English bike that's been test driven, when that was tested 0 to 60, and that had 19 kilowatts of peak power. The 0 to 60 time on that was just over 10 seconds when they did a test on it. So you start looking at that going, is that really going to make 6 seconds? No, probably not. Probably more like closer to 10 seconds. Whether it could break the 10-second barrier or not depends on the weight. Now, the weight was originally sort of 250 pounds in weight. That went up to 300 pounds in weight. So you're suddenly thinking, well, that is not going to work in the same way for its 0 to 60 time. The range, it has an 8 kilowatt motor and a 4 kilowatt hour battery. So what does that mean? Well, the Super Soco TC Max has a 3.5 kilowatt hour battery and a 5 kilowatt motor. And having used one of those for commuting, I can tell you that I never really got more than about 50 to 55 miles of range out of it. So having a slightly larger battery but a more powerful motor is going to mean that it's unlikely to achieve the claimed 80 miles of range, and you're probably going to get about 50 miles of range. And on top of that, you've got the top speed, and with 14.5 kilowatts of power, I would reckon, yeah, you probably could get 80 miles an hour, because most petrol bikes that are producing 11 kilowatts of power of the sports bikes that are producing the full 11 kilowatts of power or 14.5 brake horsepower can get close to 80 or slightly over in some instances. So no reason why the Sondors shouldn't be able to achieve that. So I published my thoughts posted my thoughts on the site and didn't really get anyone challenging me. So I don't think there's anyone that really felt that my claims were wildly exaggerated given my calculations that I'd done. I shared them with people and comparing them to other electric bikes. The problem was that with the Sondors Metacycle, deliveries were supposed to start in 2021, and by 2022, in spring, there were still no deliveries of the bike, and there were a lot of people posting saying that they were getting fed up with this, and why wasn't Sondors actually contacting them about their delivery, and just very poor communication, it appeared, that was coming from Sondors. So I carried on looking at what was going on, and June came and went, and people were saying, oh, it'll definitely be in June, and then July arrived, and they said they were going to start delivering. And the bike had been shipped from China in containers and was being distributed from their Sondors warehouse in California, I believe in Los Angeles. And they were going to start delivery to people that were on the initial list, but starting with people in California, in the surrounding areas to Los Angeles. And there were a few postings of the bikes being delivered by Sondors, and not really any people producing any information online on YouTube about reviews. And then we did get reviews out there, but the reviews suddenly weren't particularly favourable. And when I say weren't particularly favourable, first things first, Sondors had said and come clean about this, that the silver finish was not going to be the burnished, polished aluminium. The finish was going to be sprayed in silver paint. You can also have it in the supermassive black or the Arctic white. I particularly like the Arctic white, but as I said, I'm an absolute sucker for burnished aluminium. So that was the initial sort of grumbles. People were saying, I wanted it in the polished aluminium, and yeah, that's what I would want it in. The bikes that were delivered, the battery wasn't removable, and Sondors countered this by saying it is removable. All you need to do is undo the retaining screws that hold it in place, and you can remove the battery. Now, a screw is obviously a fixture. It's not a locking mechanism that you can unlock and you can then withdraw the battery. And screwing up and unscrewing screws, you are going to strip the thread, or you're going to strip the top of the head on the screw. Sooner or later, I reckon probably a dozen times, and that's it, it's done. And then you're going to have problems, or you're going to have to replace the screw, or if it strips the top of the head whilst it's in there, you're going to have problems getting the battery out. The other issues that came up, people were expecting the bike to have regenerative braking. It doesn't have regenerative braking. People were expecting it to have ABS. It doesn't have ABS. It doesn't even have a dual braking system, which is required in the UK and Europe for the bike to be sold there. And what a dual braking system is that the front and back brakes are connected. So if you apply the back brake, it'll apply the back brake. It'll also apply some of the front brake, and vice versa. You apply the front brake, it'll apply the front brake, but it'll also apply some of the back brake. So you've got a more progressive system rather than just locking up one wheel. But it doesn't even have that. The systems aren't connected from the pictures that I've seen. Whether they will rectify that in future batches so that they can sell them in Europe, I think they must do if they're looking at selling it in Europe. So there's that little problem. We then come on to the performance side of things. And the top speed is a bit of a surprise to me that the top speed, the bike didn't top out at 80. I would have expected it to have got there. Most people could get out of it was 73 miles an hour from their online postings. Now, I'm not saying it can't achieve 80. It might be able to do it downhill, wind behind, but the most that people have got out of it is 73 miles an hour. The 0 to 60, however, is way off. And when I say way off, the testing that people have put on it, the testing showed a 0 to 60 of about 11 and a half seconds, which is worse than even I had anticipated or expected. There was one particular test where the chap did say, look, I'm a big guy, I'm quite heavy, I'm 6'4" or whatever it was, and close to 300 pounds, and his 0 to 60 time was 17 seconds, which is appalling considering this was a bike that's supposed to be a 6-second 0 to 60 time. But I didn't expect it to get anywhere close to the 6 seconds that people were talking about when they put their orders in. So the other issue that we're talking about is the range, and the range that people have got just doesn't seem to be getting close to the 80 miles. If you drove it at 20 miles an hour constantly, yes, I suspect you could get close to 70, maybe 80 miles of range, but you're not going to get that normal riding. It's going to be closer to 50, and I reckon it could be if you're spirited riding on an open road. You're probably only going to get about 30 or 40 miles, but that's my best guess, and that depends on how you're riding it. But that's the same with any electric bike. It's not as though you can thrash an electric bike down the country lanes and expect to get decent range out of it. Where we have the bigger issue is when it comes to the dealer network. And the dealer network, there isn't one. Sondors are selling the bike direct. I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se, other than what happens if or when something goes wrong with the bike, because you're going to have to get it fixed, repaired. If it's under warranty, you're going to have to get it fixed and repaired by Sondors, and they don't have, at this stage, they do not have any outlets that are going to be covering different geographical regions. So if you've got to get the bike shipped back to California, at whose expense is this going to be? Because I don't see Sondors paying for it, but maybe I'm wrong, maybe they will. But with my experience of zero owners, they complain when they've got to get their bike to the nearest dealer and it's 100 miles away, let alone when you've bought a bike and you're in New Hampshire and you've got to get the bike back to California, across America, or even from the UK or Europe. What's going to happen there? And there just doesn't seem to be a lot of joined up thinking here as to how you're going to service the bikes. The other problem or issue that we've got is that you've got to read the warranty. The warranty that I have seen, and I'm not saying this is the final warranty, but I was shown a warranty that showed that the warranty did not cover any issues caused by environmental impact. And what they mean by that, they talk about water, ingression of water, or UV damage. Now, this is a motorbike. This is a motorbike, and the motorbikes are supposed to be out in the open, and ridden. And yeah, maybe you say, well, I won't ride it because it's raining or whatever. But people do expect to be able to ride their bikes and leave them out in the sun. And if they're saying, well, there's an exclusion for any damage caused by that, well, that is an environmental impact that, you just say, well, why? Because it's been raining and water has got into the system. Shouldn't they have designed the bike a bit better so that doesn't happen? So overall, if you were expecting to have regenerative braking, ABS, removable battery, lockable battery, top speed of 80 miles an hour, sub 10 second 0 to 60, you are probably looking at a bike that's going to be costing probably somewhere in the north of sort of $7,000, maybe even $8,000, in my opinion. And Sondors have already put the price up of the bike from $5,000 to $6,000. And what has happened in having the bike being built out in China is that clearly it has been built down to a cost rather than saying it's going to be a premium bike and you'll have to pay a little bit more for it. Now, some people will be prepared to pay a bit more. I know I am always prepared to pay a little bit more for better quality, but some won't. Some will just say, no, I wanted it at 5,000 and I'm happy with that. And for some people, a 50-mile range is fine. But for some people, that will not be enough. And the killer on this bike is that if it's not enough, you can't really take the battery out on a regular basis. Undoing screws is not a solution as a long-term position for people wanting to charge their bike up. As a result, would I buy the bike? Would I put down an order for it knowing what I know? And the answer is no, I wouldn't. And people say, well, okay, fine, that's your opinion. But I think a lot of people that have ordered the bike were expecting a removable battery. And for some of them, this is a real issue, irrespective of whether you're expecting regenerative braking or ABS and, the 0 to 60 performance figures and things like that. So I'm going to say that if I were buying a bike, there's nothing wrong with it being a bike that has limited performance and limited range or whatever, if you know what you're getting for a cheap price of $5,000. Yeah, that's okay. And what you are buying is a super, super cool bike. And I would stick by that. It still looks super cool. The ride wasn't great from people that test rode it, and they said the seat was uncomfortable for longer rides because it's quite narrow. And I can look at that and say, yeah, that's okay, that's livable with if you're only riding it for short distances. But I would have a bigger concern over what happens if something goes wrong and how is this going to be dealt with, because I always say the leopard does not change its spots. And if Sondors were not open with their customers, and they would have known, Sondors would have known all the issues about the delivery delays and what spec was being built. I don't know. I just feel that there's a certain amount of disingenuousness from Sondors, and that not being open and honest with your customers does not help build trust. If you're relying on the trust aspect for seeing through getting any repairs under warranty, and by the way, another issue for the future value of your bike that you may need to consider is that the warranty is not transferable. The warranty is only available to the original purchaser and not to somebody that buys the bike at a later date off the original purchaser. So, I would want to see a significantly happy customer base, reliability, know that the range would be more than 50 miles, which I don't think it will be, The performance is what it is, and it puts it in a square sort of 125 cc performance category. It is what it is. It's been an absolute delight riding through the countryside in this weather. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, hit the subscribe button, and I'll be posting my thoughts on other issues. I think the next one I'm going to be doing is the switch for bikes to electric, and why I think that the UK's switch to 125 cc's and below 5 years earlier is an extraordinarily bad idea, and the problems that it will lead to further on down the line. Thanks for watching. I'm Swiss.